So short term, enhancing supplier onboarding, pricing automation, enhancing our Shopify integration. Midterm, expanding that AI-driven catalog management and analytics to help retailers make smarter decisions. And then, long term, just becoming the leading marketplace infrastructure provider, allowing brands and retailers of all sizes just to seamlessly launch and scale their marketplace.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX-focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy and leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX.
Hello and welcome back to the Inside Commerce podcast. So I'm on my own today as James has been dragged into an integration call by one of his clients. But we're joined by a familiar face. So David has been on the podcast before when he was in the position of co-founder of KitGame, but he's now progressed onto pivoting the technology out of KitGame into a new SaaS startup. So welcome back, David. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me. Lovely to be back.
Lovely. And then maybe to start off with, if you don't mind just giving us a bit of an intro on, I guess, Zelph, like what Zelph is, and then how you ended up going from your full-time role at KitGame into the new startup.
Yeah, definitely. So again, thanks for having me back. Last time I was here was with KitGame talking about how we scaled the business. And now I've shifted focus towards Zelph, which, as you mentioned, is a SaaS platform that helps brands and retailers expand their product catalog and revenue streams without the need for holding inventory. The idea for Zelph came directly from the challenges we faced scaling KitGame. We needed a seamless way to connect suppliers and retailers in a way that was efficient, automated, and cost-effective. So we kind of took those learnings and built a fully integrated marketplace and drop shipping solution designed specifically for kind of modern e-commerce brands. A lot of the kind of challenges we faced at KitGame originally were individuals. We wanted to get access to additional stock, but we just didn't have the capital to go and buy ourselves. So we went and built a platform to allow individuals to list that stock and sell it through our website. So that was how we kind of came on to building Zelph.
So I guess first question. So I saw the technology and, it's super slick. And, even things like the app for the individuals and, how all the different workflows for managing different types of inventory and stuff. Like, was this always part of the plan for you, do you think?
What do you mean in terms of?
It was built as like, taking, because it was so polished, like, when it was part of KitGame. Like, do you think you always kind of intended or maybe saw the opportunity to build an independent product offering?
I think so. I mean, my passion has always been technology, and my brother Rob is my co-founder. During our time at KitGame, one of the biggest things for us was scaling the marketplace. We built it to kind of 10,000 sellers. We were doing £50 million a year turnover, and we really enjoyed that process of building that product from inception. And we just thought we're really missing a trick here. If we don't take what we've built and expand it and turn it into something a lot more powerful than just a sneaker resale marketplace. So I think Zelph is just a culmination of everything we've learned over the last 10 years and about what we can bring to the market and help other businesses looking to scale their own marketplaces.
Yeah, great. And I guess we've talked a bit about this in the past and we have covered some episodes around this, but so you've obviously picked up a few clients, you've only been going like, I think full-time a few months. And I guess what are the trends that are driving the demand? Like, are you seeing a lot of like brands or retailers wanting to either broaden their catalog or, sell into new categories without actually holding or buying inventory?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a few things here. One of the biggest ones is inventory risk and cash flow. So many retailers can't afford to invest heavily in stock. And for retailers like those, Zelph's a great solution. You can seamlessly onboard third-party suppliers and have them fulfill on your behalf to your customers. So it just gives you access to a wide range of inventory. And then kind of the other things, you're looking at supplier onboarding. So managing multiple suppliers is messy when you're dealing with different terms, different product data formats and pricing structures. And then you've got things like fulfillment complexity. So coordinating shipping, pricing, and stock updates across multiple suppliers is a huge challenge. And then I think lastly, automation gap. Most brands and retailers lack tech and infrastructure to actually streamline a marketplace or dropshipping model. There's a lot of apps you can kind of download, but they don't really work in the way that you need them to, especially if you've got custom processes around your business.
Great. And I guess the next question was going to be focused on kind of some of the challenges that led to you building out some of the functionality. We kind of covered that a little bit. But I guess going back to, when you've shown me the tech in the past, I was really impressed with some of the depth around things like, the ship, like how far we went with things like the shipping labels for individuals and fraud and whatever else. Are there any other challenges that you haven't touched on that you think are like particularly important to Zelph?
Yeah, so there's a lot of technical challenges in building Zelph, and some of the big ones I'll touch on just briefly. So standardizing supplier data. So every supplier has different way of formatting SKUs, pricing, and inventory. So the way that even somebody writes a size. So one supplier may write UK 8 and then include a US pricing in their variant, or they may include a EU pricing, so UK 8, EU 40. Whereas other suppliers will just include the UK 8. So we had to build standardization for suppliers so that when we ingest their inventory and products, we use automated data mapping to solve it for when retailers subscribe to that inventory. Another one, which is really complex, is the scalability side. So marketplaces require real-time updates across thousands of products and suppliers. So our API infrastructure ensures that you get seamless performance. And the way that we do that a lot of the time is with something called Shopify bulk operations. So Shopify bulk operations is a tool that helps businesses handle large amounts of data efficiently without slowing down their store. So if you wanted to change thousands of prices at once, you can send one request to Shopify. They do all of the heavy lifting in the background without sending thousands of API requests back and forward. So it's just about leveraging the right tools at the right time for the right process.
Right. Yes, that's really interesting. And then I guess over the years, James and I have had quite a few guests who have kind of talked about Miracle, and we've, talked about Miracle. And I think Miracle have done an amazing job at being kind of synonymous with this space, particularly in the enterprise. But obviously, it's quite expensive, and it's a bit. I mean, I won't say too much about the technology, but it's not a low barrier to entry to use Miracle, I would say. So would you kind of compare yourself to someone like Miracle, and is your goal to essentially offer something that's more accessible to brands? I realize that's a bit of a convoluted question.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So yeah, Miracle's really built for enterprise level retailers with large teams and budgets, and Zelph was kind of designed for a wider range of businesses, like including scaling brands, mid-sized retailers, and kind of curated marketplaces that need something a lot more simpler and cost-effective. And unlike Miracle, Zelph is natively built for Shopify out of the box, making the integration seamless. I personally know a business that's been trying to integrate Miracle for the last year and a half. It spent £500,000 doing it. They're on Magento 2. It's been the biggest nightmare. They're pulling their hair out over it, and they just wish they'd never gone down that road. So look, I think Miracle have a fantastic product, but they are, like you said, really catered for that enterprise end of the market. And we just want to bring something that's accessible to everyone. So you may even just have a side business selling jewelry, and you want to bring somebody else's artwork into your store or somebody else's rings. And even if you're doing kind of just a couple million in revenue, Zelph's going to be an ideal solution for you, whereas Miracle is just unobtainable.
Yeah, and I do think, I've personally spoken quite a few brands over the years that have kind of found that gap. And there was one of them that I was particularly impressed with that have gone through a bit of change, but we'll come on to that in the next question. Slightly broader question now. So I think there's a number of well-known, traditional, independent kind of marketplaces that have struggled over the last few years, like in part due to, costs increasing around kind of building a brand as a multi-brand vendor and amongst other things. However, I think there's a lot of positivity around what you're creating, which is kind of building out marketplace functionality within a brand who are kind of already paying those costs to bring traffic in, and then pushing basket, pushing margins, etc. I guess where do you see marketplaces going over the next few years, and how do you kind of see this space changing?
Yeah, also a really good question. I think marketplaces are shifting from product resellers to ecosystem builders. So what I mean by that is traditionally marketplaces functioned as middlemen, simply connecting buyers and sellers, and the focus was on scaling product selection rather than improving the shopping experience. And now leading marketplaces are moving towards ecosystem-driven models, offering things like loyalty programs. And prime example of that, excuse the pun, is Amazon Prime or eBay Plus. And then you've got subscription-based access, so exclusive discounts, early product drops. And then a lot of marketplaces now are offering embedded financial services. You're seeing the likes of buy now, pay later. So marketplaces like Very offering their own buy now, pay later. Then you've got value-added services like white label fulfillment and marketing support. So I think this shift makes marketplaces stickier for both customers and sellers, turning them into platforms that drive long-term engagement rather than just transaction volume, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I think Zelph enables brands and retailers to create their own ecosystem, offering not just products, but like curated experiences that keep customers coming back.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's quite a nice, I guess it's an alternative approach. Like you look at a lot of the multi-brand retailers and not necessarily marketplaces that are actually, performing well. They've got quite a high proportion of their own brand product or higher margin products. And I guess when you do combine the two models, like there is a lot more potential. So it's just an alternative way to look at that. So one vendor that we've had on in the past and someone that I've seen quite a lot, and maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I was particularly impressed with, and I think they had Made.com as an early client and a couple of other UK brands, was Convictional. And they had some smart people in there that I've known for years through the commerce space. And essentially, I believe now they've kind of pivoted Convictional to be more focused on like an AI productivity tool. They then renamed the kind of drop shipping and onboarding technology to Modern Dropship, which is now sold to Caro. I haven't seen as much of them anymore. I guess, would you say that you're kind of targeting that same kind of space as they were, or how would you differentiate?
Yeah. So also, great question. And what they built is really smart, but I think they primarily focused on the US market. I never really saw one retailer or supplier that was in Europe or in the UK, but
they had a few ones actually. Okay. I remember Made.com was a big one, and I think in fact it did go live, but then obviously Made.com went under, and I think they were doing a POC with John Lewis, which I think would be fine to talk about, but again, that was quite a while ago. Early on in their journey.
So most drop shipping solutions focus on supplier aggregation, and we kind of go beyond that by offering end-to-end marketplace infrastructure. So Zelph gives retailers more control over pricing, fulfillment, branding, whereas tools like that, those dropship tools kind of limit retailers to supplier set conditions. We also offer a separate model, which I don't believe they offer, which is the consignment model, where retailers can have private sellers that only belong to their store and they can supply products to that retailer. This is more like what we did at Kit Game with the sneaker marketplace model, where you can have thousands of individual sellers listing items. This model can also be expanded for retailers wanting to allow their customers to resell like pre-loved items for the circular business model, which I know is quite popular at the moment. So our focus is really on building high quality, scalable marketplaces, not just adding random products from a supplier network. I think that's probably the biggest difference.
No, I think that makes sense. And like we said at the start, I think there's a lot of depth that's come off the back of Kit Game that I think supports a lot of that. And I guess next one. So what do you think the biggest, and I can think of a few, but what do you think the biggest misconceptions are for brands looking at drop shipping or a marketplace model?
So a lot of misconceptions that I hear quite often. So there's that it's set and forget, and success requires supplier and product curation. So many retailers assume that once they integrate suppliers into their marketplace, everything will just run on autopilot. But in reality, it's an ongoing curation of suppliers and products is essential to maintaining that quality. And preventing fraudulent sellers and ensuring customers always receive great experience. So retailers need to be another one is like retailers need to be proactive in onboarding reliable suppliers. So I see a lot of marketplaces and the product curation is just terrible and there's no real focus. So you could have like a fashion store and maybe you'd see smart speakers and it just doesn't make sense for the brand. So I just think in those examples, retailers, they need to be more selective about which suppliers they're onboarding. So tech like Zelph helps automate a lot of this, but marketplace owners still need a strategy for supplier engagement and especially a strategy around like promotions and quality control. Another one is like margins are really thin and marketplaces can't be profitable, and that's just not true. And there's this perception that drop shipping and marketplaces only work with razor thin margins, but profitability comes from strategic pricing and supply negotiation. So it's about having those good relationships with your suppliers and being able to reach out to them. So we built a platform where you can offer a commission to the supplier. So you can say, "Hi, Paul, you've got this t-shirt store. I love your products. I'd love to sell this category of t-shirts that you have on your website for 20%, but the jeans that you have in your store, we feel like we can sell them for more money. So I'm happy to take 15% on these." So we offer the individual capability to set commissions on individual products, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll come on to that in a second and like some of the commercial side. One thing I was going to say as well is I think maybe at the start of COVID, one of our biggest clients who had a really strong brand in the kind of sustainable fashion space was actually looking at this, and they really wanted to offer kind of additional, very like conscious, eco-friendly products to existing customers. They wanted to better commercialize their brand, and they built this kind of brand awareness, and they had huge amounts of traffic that, is a single category catalog. But one of the reasons they didn't do it was essentially complexity on the finance, tax, all of that side of things. But I think, how can do you support any of that from a Shopify perspective? And I guess working with Shopify, because at the time, these products just weren't available and Miracle was the main option. There are a couple of like really low end Shopify apps that could support. But yeah, how do you facilitate for some of that stuff?
Yeah, so our system ensures really transparent cost structures, allowing retailers to set their own pricing whilst factoring in the supply costs and the shipping and commission. So we provide automated margin control so retailers don't have to manually calculate pricing updates across the catalog. So we've got a feature called dynamic pricing, which allows merchants to adjust pricing based on supplier changes, demand trends, seasonal shifts. We also allow retailers to automatically ingest compare out prices from suppliers, for example. So if a supplier goes on sale, you can instantly mimic that and then bring in those sale products into your own store. So, and then another one is kind of the flow of funds. And just to kind of explain how that works. So customer purchase, a customer buys a supplier's item from the retailer's Shopify storefront, just like any other transaction. In terms of the payment collection, Shopify collects the full amount from the customer, which is the MSRP, the taxes, the shipping fees. And then there's a kind of the supplier payment deduction. So Zelph charges the storefront via Shopify for the supplier's cut and the shipping costs. And then the retailer would keep the agreed upon commission, which is the difference between the MSRP and the supplier cost. And then the storefront is charged separately for Zelph service fees. And then we will relay the fees to the supplier. So everything's automated, and we've done it via Stripe, which is just a great system for processing payouts. So it should be really seamless in terms of working between retailers and suppliers and how funds are distributed.
Great. I think we'll probably skip the next one actually, because we've got between the last two questions, we've kind of covered it. I think the only one thing I would say, there's a little bit around margin. And I think the only one thing that I would say where we have seen people implement this is quite often you've got all of your kind of cost of existing traffic, cost per acquisition, etc. And if you've got a 50% gross margin and then you've got your 20% coming from a drop shipping relationship, essentially you've got the net 20% because you're already paying for the traffic. And I think that's where I've definitely seen some people do really well off this, where they've got their whole catalog and then they've just got obviously lower margins on drop ship items, but they're purely for upsells, cross sells, increase in basket size, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. Just a prime example of that is we're working with a store at the moment. They're a tennis marketplace, and they just wanted a solution to be able to upsell rather than just have inventory. And one of the things they've done is they've onboarded like a sock supplier, because it's just important to upsell that existing order. They're doing well selling t-shirts and shorts and other tennis products, but they wanted that upsell product and didn't necessarily want to lay out a huge amount of capital to buy that product themselves. So for them, Zelph was a perfect solution where they could onboard a third party just to have those small upsells, whether it's socks or tennis rackets or tennis balls and things like that. So it really helps improve margins for suppliers like that.
Makes sense. And then I guess, how do you talk us through the integration for Shopify stores? Like, yeah, how deep do you go? You know, is it a case of you've got an existing app? Talk us through the end to end and maybe any kind of impacts from a back office perspective, etc. as well.
So yeah, it's different depending on who you are. So if you're a retailer and you're on Shopify, it's a seamless integration. So you go onto Zelph, you sign up, and we ingest all of your products and inventory into what we call like a PIM, an inventory management dashboard. And from there, you've got a discovery section where you can browse various suppliers and you can send them a proposal and say, "Hi, Paul, I love your t-shirt store. Can we work together? These are the terms I'm proposing." You would then receive in your inbox as a supplier that proposal, and you could kind of counter negotiate. Once you've agreed terms, we would ingest your products into that retailer Shopify, and there would be a two-way sync. So anytime anything's sold, we would update the inventory in both stores. Likewise for orders and fulfillment. All of the orders and fulfillment still take place in Shopify. So when the retailer gets an order, we create an order in the retailer Shopify, and then we create an order in the supplier Shopify. And the supplier, anytime they add the tracking information, we relay that straight away to the retailer Shopify. And then in terms of like onboarding suppliers, it's a similar process. They come to Zelph, they set up a brand profile, they put how quickly they fulfill, and they can choose to integrate via Shopify right now. We're looking to add on other e-commerce platforms in the future, or they can manually add products and then retailers can subscribe to those manual products. What we're seeing a lot of the time now is people have third-party inventory management platforms and PIMs and warehouse management tools. So I think after we've kind of finished polishing the Shopify integration, we'll start looking more closely into the automated feeds and CSV uploads and being able to integrate with some of these other kind of inventory management platforms.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess in most cases, Shopify can just play the role of the middleman anyway with the back office side.
Exactly. We let Shopify do most of the heavy lifting. All we're really doing is relaying information back and forward between our platform and Shopify and ensuring that inventory stays in sync between the retailers and the suppliers.
And I guess historically, your bread and butter would have been, I guess, ensuring that inventory was always up to date, especially if you've got like, individuals selling one high value item. How do you assure that? So are you just constantly pushing inventory updates into the store, or is it a case of you're kind of checking at point of purchase?
Do you mean for when the retailer is onboarding a supplier's product?
If you're the brand, I'm a retailer, I'm selling your product, but actually you've got low inventory. I then constantly kept up to date and know to mark something as out of stock, for example.
It just happens automatically because if let's say the suppliers on Shopify and the retailers on Shopify, we're reading the inventory quantities directly from the supplier Shopify. So if something's out of stock on the supplier Shopify, it's also out of stock on the retailer Shopify. And we're ensuring, so theoretically, everything should be identical in terms of inventory quantities. There should never be a case where a retailer has higher quantities than the supplier. Everything should be one for one and like for like.
Do you have, this is a bit of a tangent, just something I'm curious about. Do you have the ability to, so for example, could you have two locations so you could then stock for D2C, but then have like an additional stock pool for the drop shipping and retailer side?
Yeah. So one of the things that we recently did actually was we create a new location on Shopify called Zelph Remote. And then you can assign inventory just to that location if you wanted to have separate. And one of the reasons we did that is we've got a sample sale brand that we're working with, and they do physical in warehouse events where they have private events where people will come, and they wanted to reserve certain amount of stock just for their physical events and not necessarily have it available online. So we had to have separate locations to have different amounts of stock available.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking. And then last one, can you support either side if they're not on Shopify? So you mentioned that at the moment, and it makes complete sense for the retailer, I guess, or the person selling the product to be on Shopify, because obviously everything's super simple and you've already built it to get going. Can you support pulling in inventory and information from non-Shopify?
So yeah, right now we can't. What we can do is we can support a product feed. So like an API, we've built an API. So if the supplier we're working with has the ability to interact with an API, or they have a technical team that can interact with the API, they can send their products and inventory through that API to our platform. Most of the businesses we're working with at the moment don't really have that capability, just because the nature of the businesses that we're dealing with right now, they tend to be a little bit smaller, or they're just not at that level yet. And this actually could probably be a good question for you with your industry and your background. So after Shopify, who would you say Zelph is important to integrate with? I'd be interested to hear from you.
I think purely from a volume perspective, I think you have to say Magento. And I also type of business that are likely to be doing this, I think you have to say Magento. Because I think the other choice would have been Salesforce Commerce Cloud, but I think my experience of a lot of the businesses on Salesforce is like this type of net new functionality, channel, everything else is probably slightly further down the priority list. Maybe that's a bit harsh and based on my experience, but I'd probably be saying Magento, to be honest.
Not BigCommerce.
I don't think so. No. No, I don't think they've got. I mean, BigCommerce would be another good one to do, but I think I'd probably wait and kind of see where they end up going over the next year. Because I'd probably say Magento's got less long-term potential, but they've got this, huge client set that are like, typically pretty big, quite complex. Selling across multiple channels, etc. Whereas with BigCommerce, I think they've got, a lot of smaller clients. They do have some bigger ones, but I don't think they have that same volume as Magento right now. But if they get the right ownership structure moving forward, I do think then they would be a much better choice.
Are you not seeing though just kind of the demise of Magento and people just moving over to Shopify? So would you even like invest time and resources into that channel if it's just on a downward spiral?
I wouldn't build a connector personally. I'd probably more enable yourself to onboard Magento brands. So like you say, via an inventory feed and a product feed, rather than building out like a Magento module. That said, I mean, I don't put Magento winning much net new. Like you say, they're losing market share all the time. However, they've still got some amazing businesses on that platform. And the other thing I would say is multi-brand retail, complex B2C, B2B. I think they're still going to be, big for the next few years off the back of their existing clients. And I think they're also probably the ones that, would be most likely to be looking at a miracle or maybe looking at other ways to sell on other channels.
Yeah, that makes sense. I actually speak to a lot of Magento stores that have like a multi-vendor marketplace module already installed, and they're looking to kind of pivot away from that.
Exactly. Yeah, there's that module. I've forgotten what it's called. But yeah, there is a module that a lot of people use for kind of the base. But yeah, I mean that. And actually, I have seen some of that type of stuff where you use the module and then you build on top of it as being like a counter argument to replatforming. So I mean, I can imagine over time you'll probably pick up a lot of those businesses.
And what do you think about WooCommerce, or just stay clear?
I mean, again, I'd facilitate for it, and the same would apply to BigCommerce as well. But for me, I just don't know if the brands, I don't think they've got enough big brands, because presumably your like ICP would be what, 10 to 100 million pound.
Correct. Yeah.
Retailer. And I just think there's a lot more of them on Magento than there would be on WooCommerce. So, and I think you'll probably find it'll be quite easy to pick up like a POC with one of those businesses.
Yeah, we've just been super focused on just building around Shopify just because everyone we speak to, or well, 99% of people are all on Shopify, suppliers, retailers. And I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing to have like such a big monopoly like that, because I do like healthy competition. I think it's good to have other people in the market, but it just really feels like there's no competition to Shopify right now.
I mean, I could talk about this all day, as you know. We've spoke about it so much over the years. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just the situation at the minute. I think Shopify are winning 95%. They're niche competitors. So I really like Centra, great product.
Centra's really great.
Yeah, they would be a great fit to work with you, but they're still kind of, picking up volume at the moment. And it's just that kind of, I guess for you, it's the opportunity to then invest in building a connector, but they would be one that I think are doing well. And then outside of that, I think there's like a few smaller niche or like lower volume niche players as well. So like Scale, like Commerce Layer. But there's not too many
I'm hearing less and less of those guys every day. Like there was a lot and it just seems to be on the decline. But
Commerce Layer have got some big ones. So they have won a few big ones. So yeah, I don't see them as much in the UK at the moment, but they have won some big ones. So for any of those platforms, I would personally say just build out the APIs, get to a point where you can ingest the feeds. And then focus your attention on Shopify, as risky as it is. I think if you're building a SaaS platform nowadays, that's pretty much strategy that everyone's.
And yeah, that's I think that's good advice. And I also wanted to ask you, what was your thoughts on the circular kind of marketplace model? Because we looked at that model quite closely. And again, I've never really been 100% sold on it, but I'm sure that you have clients that use it or do well with it. I know Pangaya's one person that does quite well from it. So what do you think of that model? And do you actually see any retailers doing well with that circular pre-loved?
I think it's interesting. So there's someone that I know pretty well in the space, so a company called Turn, who you should chat to actually, because I think Kate and Zoe, they're super well kept, really smart, and I think you guys would all get on. They're building essentially a solution for Shopify around resale. I think my view on the market is, I think for a brand to do really well in it and get any volume, I think you've got to build like a really good incentive for doing it. So that could be part of like a way broader, really active loyalty program, or there's some kind of money can't buy benefit, or you give something that you can't get from another channel. Because the only thing that I find, and I've seen 20, 30, 40 brands, invest in this area, usually via a third party that does end to end, which isn't necessarily the right route, I don't think. Because then you've got completely independent customer experience, everything else. But the thing that I would say is like the volume, as far as I can see right now, is going through Vinted. Obviously, the risk to the brand, because I think, to be honest, another podcast I would like to do. So our company has quite a lot of 22 to 25-year-olds, and the proportion of the clothes that they buy that are brand new versus already worn, or they're rebuying is is crazy. Like, and it's the consumer that's growing up is very, very different to older consumers who have been trained to always buy new clothes. So I think it's going to get bigger and bigger. Brands want to own the data. Brands want to retain a customer, etc., etc. So I think there will become more of a market there. But right now,
do you see anyone doing it well specifically? Like any retailer with like a nice polished experience on buying something, then being able to reset it through their own portal?
The people that I think that do it well that I can see are some of the watch brands.
The watch,
and even then, I don't think they're getting much volume, but there's enough incentive, particularly someone like Rolex, where there's, masses and massive, and you'll know more about this than me, but masses and massive of opportunity of, they need to protect the brand, etc., etc. But to be perfectly honest, I think in most industries, most of the volume is going through now Vinted, historically Vinted, Depop, some of the other ones.
I think there's an opportunity for a lot of the premium brands to do it, because you can imagine people would want to buy, I don't know, a handbag if it was, I think that's the kind of perfect model for it, or watches. Yeah. But to resell like a hoodie that's been worn, I'm not sure if there's a huge appetite for that.
And I actually think the risk to brands, because I've seen so many brands do it, the risk is that you just don't get any volume and then it just looks a bit rubbish. I think if you do it, you've just got to be super intentional and you've got to like put something behind it. And one brand that I work with that did do ridiculously well for it was Fairfax and Favour. But the reason they did so well was because one, there was so much demand for collections of products that couldn't be bought online anymore. And they drove a lot of the volume because they used old stock as part of it. And two, they just got such an active customer community. And the price point was pretty good. But yeah, I think without some of those levers, I think it's really difficult to,
Would you personally buy pre-loved from any brands that you like love? That you
would, but there would have to be a driver for me to buy it. So if I wanted to buy something pre-owned, obviously, dependent on what it is, you've got the range of something like vintage, or a watch marketplace or a sneaker marketplace, etc. The reason I'd buy it direct would have to be some kind of like guarantee, some kind of like price benefit, or like some kind of experience benefit, or loyal. If I'm that active a customer in the brand, the loyalty side. But I think that's a big part to it personally.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for the insights. Sorry?
You agree with that? You've got more
Yeah.
in this area.
Yeah, 100%. I can't see myself personally buying pre-loved low value clothing, but I do see there is that vintage side for it. But for other things like more premium, if it was, I don't know, a Stone Island jacket, which was very lightly worn or worn once or twice and it was half price off, then I'm a customer all day.
Is the one Irish is. But the other side, inside where I do think, because I think both of us will naturally go to like premium fashion, premium accessories, whatever else. There are some industries. So the one that I was talking to Kate and Zoe about was kids' toys. And so I have a nearly 2-year-old. I know you've got a son or
a 4-year-old, yeah.
4-year-old. So like that is a market, like anything to do with kids, I think just naturally makes sense. So I don't know whether there's, and like we work with micro scooters at the moment, and I think someone like them, there's
big opportunity there. Yeah,
there's definitely some kind of opportunity there, particularly for parents that have got multiple kids or product where you go up in age sizes.
Yeah, because what do parents do once your kids grow up? They normally just take the toys to the local charity shop, or they try and hand me down to other family members. But there's probably a massive opportunity there for a toy marketplace or a secondhand pre-loved marketplace where they refurbish it, they polish it, they bring them back to life, and
with some kind of again like guarantee or something. But I watch my fiance's like shopping habits on Depop, and like she will almost end up like net zero with like this whole thing to do with Maxwell's like clothing or whatever else, or toys, etc. So it's an interesting area, and I think the brands will have to adapt as it becomes bigger and bigger, to be honest.
Definitely.
So that's a nice sort of tangent. But 2 more questions for you. So first one, these are bigger, kind of more long-term questions. So what's your go-to-market strategy for Zelph? Like who are you targeting? More brands, retailers, or marketplaces first?
Yeah, so I think we're initially targeting Shopify-based retailers purely looking to expand their product range. That would be the first one. The second focus is kind of D2C brand suppliers that want to sell through these third-party marketplaces. And then long term, I think we aim to work with larger retailers needing more flexible supply integrations. But our bread and butter is really going to be kind of your smaller, up to 100 million Shopify-based retailer just looking to expand their product range into other verticals.
Great. And then last question. So where do you see Zelph going long term? And I guess, are there any like really big new features you're kind of looking to introduce? And also knowing you and knowing how much you like technology and innovation, where does AI fit into Zelph as well?
Yeah, so good question. So Zelph's long-term vision is to kind of redefine how brands and retailers scale their product offerings. So making marketplaces, drop shipping, and supplier integration effortless. So we're focusing on 3 major areas of innovation. The first one, as you mentioned, is AI-driven supplier matching and automated catalog curation. So one of the biggest challenges in launching a marketplace or adopting dropshipping is finding the right suppliers and right products. So we're developing an AI-driven supplier matching engine, which will automatically suggest the best suppliers based on a retailer's existing product catalog. So we'll ingest what you're currently selling and try and make you smart recommendations who we think you should match with. And then using machine learning to rank suppliers based on things like fulfillment speed, order accuracy, and historical performance. Some of the learnings we had from Kit Game where people would let us down when we were waiting for products inbound to our warehouse, and then ultimately the customer would be let down. So making sure that suppliers are shipping on time and things like that are really critical to ensuring the customer experience is top notch. And then things like offering automated catalog curation, so filtering out like low quality or underperforming products to make sure that the marketplace is highly optimized. And then kind of the second one is like deeper analytics to optimize the pricing and inventory strategy. So retailers and brands often struggle with dynamic pricing, stock planning, and margin control. So we're developing an engine that will kind of give real-time pricing insights and help merchants set optimal margins based on supplier costs. And if there is a kind of demand or a trend, it will be able to adapt that margin, increase it or decrease it based on that trend or based on that demand. And then things around like stock demand forecasting. So analyzing past sales, seasonality, market trends to predict which products will perform best and recommend inventory allocation accordingly. And then the last one is kind of expanding beyond Shopify to support what we discussed before, enterprise level retailers in the future. So while Zelph now is currently focused on Shopify-based brands and retailers, we see an opportunity to expand into that kind of other space with custom API integrations. So one of the brands we're dealing with at the moment is on NetSuite, and everything's managed through them, and it's been a real struggle to kind of work with them. So in the future, I think making sure that we have like a really top-notch, easy-to-use API integration for the bigger brands is going to put us in good stead for the future.
Yeah. The other route you could go down with that is potentially partnering with someone as well. So say, for example, if you have Patchworks or one of the integration companies, and you essentially use their middleware.
Yeah, that's also a good idea. There's Patchworks and there's the other one as well. High Cohesion. Yeah, Luke's a great guy. And then I just think, our kind of future vision, we want to have the ultimate marketplace infrastructure. So short term, enhancing supplier onboarding, pricing automation, enhancing our Shopify integration. Midterm, expanding that AI-driven catalog management and analytics to help retailers make smarter decisions. And then, long term, just becoming the leading marketplace infrastructure provider, allowing brands and retailers of all sizes just to seamlessly launch and scale their marketplace.
Great. Well, that's super interesting. I think this area, represents a big opportunity for, both brands and, brands on either side and retailers and marketplaces. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Zelph continues to grow. And if people wanted to contact you to find out more or book a demo or kind of ask more about this area, how would they do that?
Yeah, so you can email me directly, just david@zelph.com. Happy to hear from you. You can send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can just go to zelph.com. There's a calendar integration. You can just put some time directly in my calendar. I'm happy to talk to you.
Love it. Perfect. So thanks everyone for listening. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope you have as well. As always, please feel free to follow us or like the episode, etc. And we'll be back soon with another episode.
Thanks for having me.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.